Fort Sackville was a British fort located in present-day Bedford, Nova Scotia that was built during Father Loutre's War. The British built the fort adjacent to present-day Scott Manor House, on a hill overlooking the Sackville River to help prevent French, Acadian and Mi'kmaq attacks on Halifax. The fort consisted of a blockhouse, a guardhouse, a barracks which housed 50 soldiers, and outbuildings, all encompassed by a palisade. Not far from the fort was a rifle range. The fort was named after George Sherman, 1st Viscount Sackville. Historical context: despite the British conquest of Acadia in 1710, Nova Scotia remained primarily occupied by Catholic Acadians and Mi'kmaq. Father Loutre's War began when Edward Cornwallis arrived to establish Halifax with 13 transports on June 21, 1749. By unilaterally establishing Halifax, the British were violating earlier treaties with the Mi'kmaq, which were signed after Father Rail's War. The British remained largely in Halifax. Having attempted to establish a settlement east of Halifax near present-day Lawrencetown Beach, they quickly abandoned the effort due to the threat of Mi'kmaq attacks. 4 years after the founding of Halifax, Lunenburg was established, to guard against Mi'kmaq, Acadian and French attacks on the new Protestant settlements. British fortifications were erected in Halifax, Bedford, Dartmouth, Lunenburg and Lawrencetown. Within 18 months of establishing Halifax, the British also took firm control of Peninsula Nova Scotia by building fortifications in all the major Acadian communities, present-day Windsor, Grand Prix and Chignecto. Father Loutre's War. On September 11, 1749, Cornwallis sent New England Ranger John Gorham to build a fort at the mouth of the Sackville River. The fort was to protect Halifax from attack by the Wabanaki Confederacy, Acadians and French. Gorham's Rangers were primarily natives from Cape Cod, his own hometown. He was sent with an armed vessel that stayed with him as Fort Sackville was built. 5 weeks later, on October 17, Cornwallis wrote, "The posts of the head of the bay and Minas are made secure." Lt. Robert Patershaw of the 40th Regiment of Foot was also stationed at the fort, while Gorham used Fort Sackville as his base from which he scoured the country for Mi'kmaq scalps as per Cornwallis's bounty set October 1749. Cornwallis ordered Gorham to Pisiquid November 9 in an attempt to relieve the Mi'kmaq and Acadian siege of Grand Prix. Gorham also oversaw the establishment of a road to Windsor, which was completed by December 17. Gorham left again on January 3, 1750. He was again ordered to Pisiquid to build Fort Edward on March 29, 1750. On his way he engaged in the surprise battle at St. Croix with Mi'kmaq. Gorham had to seek relief from Captain William Clapham, who arrived with Rangers from Fort Sackville. In early 1750, Captain Alexander Murray commanded at Fort Sackville, and then in September 1751 he was given command of Fort Edward. In August 1750, Cornwallis replaced Gorham at Fort Sackville with Captain Francis Bartello, who was killed the following month in the battle at Chignecto. Gorham returned to Fort Sackville by March 1751. In the summer of 1751, Gorham built the first registered vessel in Halifax, a brig he named Osborne Galley at Gorham Point. In late September 1752, Mi'kmaq scalped a man they had caught outside the palisade of Fort Sackville. French and Indian War. During the French and Indian War, in April 1757, a band of Acadian and Mi'kmaq partisans raided a warehouse nearby Fort Edward, killing 13 British soldiers and, after taking what provisions they could carry, setting fire to the building. A few days later, the same partisans also raided Fort Cumberland. Because of the strength of the Acadian militia and Mi'kmaq militia, British officer John Knox wrote that, in the year 1757 we were said to be masters of the province of Nova Scotia, or Acadia, which, however, was only an imaginary possession. Quote, he continues to state that the situation in the province was so precarious for the British that the troops and inhabitants at Fort Edward, Fort Sackville and Lunenburg could not be reputed in any other light than as prisoners. American Revolution. During this war the fort was an important way station between Halifax and Fort Edward in Windsor and points beyond, including Fort Cumberland. As the war went on, the Royal Nova Scotia Volunteer Regiment became competent enough to serve as the garrison of the fort, under day-to-day command of the senior captain, John Solomon. Wars of the French Revolution. During most of this period Fort Sackville was garrisoned by detachments of the Royal Nova Scotia Regiment. On July 1, 1797, 34 officers and men are shown as being on duty. Commanders: John Gorham, Robert Pater Shaw, Alexander Murray, Francis Bartello, John Solomon, Joseph Scott. Legacy: Fort Sackville Elementary, grades primary and grade 1, offers early French immersion. Fort Sackville Road, Bedford, Nova Scotia.